want to hear the...
This is my Daria pop. I love Daria. Hulu, stop playing. I'm not going to leave you there, but just know you're my superhero. Alright, let's talk about it. If you know me in the slightest bit, you'd know that my all-time favorite cartoon, hell, TV show in general, is Daria. My demeanor, mannerisms, and joking style, I'd say largely came from watching Daria as a kid when I could catch it on TV. Large emphasis on when, because after 4 or 5 years of being off the air, no DVRs in sight, I rarely caught it and rarely quickly became never. From then, I'd watch clips on YouTube and beg for all 5 seasons on DVD every birthday for years, and recently I started hoping it'd make its way to a streaming service, and spoiler alert, COVID hit, meaning my TV was on at all times, and I became aware it had been on Hulu for almost 2 years, and I binged it all day and all night. Watching Daria nonstop, I found myself identifying why I love this show so much as a kid. Much like any cartoon, it's the same characters, new situation, overarching lesson, learned at the end, blah, blah, blah. But along with this classic cartoon format also came Daria pretty much putting everything down that wasn't her watching Six at World, reading a book, or eating pizza with Jane. It made everything seem so... I hate this word, relatable for a kid-teen at the time. But as a 22-year-old, I found myself at times subconsciously telling Daria to maybe chill out, take it easy in certain situations, as it almost felt she was too angry and that her reasons for being annoyed with everyone and everything, for that matter, didn't hold up anymore. I always remained understanding, but some, as you can see, were not. As you go through the seasons, you can see her start to rid of this constant annoyance and open herself up to more ideas, i.e. her relationship with Tom. All this to say that Daria began showing growth and some self-awareness, bringing me to my favorite episode of Daria, the last episode. In this video, we're going to discuss how Daria's last episode was potentially the best in showing how different she's dealing with trauma, being more vulnerable than ever with her parents, and learning to not be so hard on everyone, including herself. Let's get it.
And there's no aspect, no facet, no moment of life that can't be improved with pizza. Thank you.
Recording. The episode Boxing Daria comes as the last episode of the 5th season and series in general. Season 5 is full of Daria experiencing a lot of firsts that are pretty typical for teens. Her first relationship with Tom for one, and another being her near fallout with Jane. These new but very familiar situations / feelings in Daria's life really added a new layer for the show, and seeing Daria's emotional wall go down in ways we've never seen before. Though those 2 specific things were huge in Daria's life and development as a young adult, the biggest emotional wall that she had built up to this point was going to be coming down in a very, very crazy way, and it all started with seeing a box. Before getting into the meat of the episode, I think it's important to note Daria's natural standoffish behavior towards her folks for the entire show. I, for one, always chalked it up to pure annoyance and somewhat angst. You gotta wonder if the situation this whole episode is built around has just been festering in her head, and the moment she saw the refrigerator box, it just snapped into her head. It's like, whoa, that did happen, and the result is this. The episode starts with a dark screen and sounds of screeching wheels, followed with a stranger asking if a girl involved in an apparent accident was alright. This was easily the most dramatic start to any episode of Daria, and the change of pace from a typical episode start was refreshing and had me incredibly engaged in what was to come the first time I ever watched it. Cutting back to the Morgendorfer's house while a fridge is being installed, then back to the house where Daria notices the installers left the box, but not before she questioned the whereabouts of her dad. I've seen this episode a number of times, and Daria piecing up the absence of her dad and the memory of having a similar box around as a kid in a mere 2 seconds really shows how traumatic the single event was to her, because she really kind of X'd it out of her head in more ways than not. And putting like the two context clues of dad leaving, box, that's my safe place. And I think she remembered it, of course, but like I think those two things happening in that moment like really sent her back to that moment, and it was obviously traumatic for her. Later on, Daria gets her first flashback of the episode, previewing the fight that her parents had that she heard as a 6-year-old, and she heard word for word. Daria's demeanor in the episode following her first callback to the incident comes off as angry, defensive, fed up, and she truly is. Her outburst on Mr. O'Neill attempting to get her to do a tour of the school for incoming freshmen was just the beginning. She got upset at his approach of implying the others were joiner types and the younger students needed to see another type of student, to which she took as him calling her a non-joiner type, a misfit, she said. She walked off madly, saying she can get along with other people. And I think that those two encounters that Mr. O'Neill and Daria had would be very, very, very important for Daria going through this whole episode, because she is a non-joiner type, a misfit. She's really just drawn up herself as the person that is outside of the norm, and I think that she's starting to become more aware of that, and we'll get into that later on, because I think self-awareness is a thing that happens a lot in this episode. Her anger continues to grow as her mom dances around the conversation, even lying at some point. And while her anger grows, Daria's understanding of the incident grows as well. When showing the box to Jane, Jane began throwing jokes at it just being a box, while Daria began to realize that it was way more for her than a box. It was her escape from reality. And that reality at that moment, when she was 6 years old, was her feeling like a complete burden to her parents. As Quinn suddenly remembers the night too and talks to Daria about it, the whole incident is shown. It's Jake and Helen leaving work to get Daria help with her social skills, and Daria not willing to work with literally anyone. She just wanted to read her books. It fades to the night, and Jake and Helen have a huge argument, with slamming doors and Jake fleeing the scene, which is largely centered around Daria's lack of effort to make friends or be social or do things that other kids are doing in her age group, leading Daria to grab her book and crawl into her box, where she felt the most safe and also felt like she wasn't bothering anyone. And in real time, Daria found herself right back into that box, trying to just run away from the current reality of like, wow, I'm a burden. Daria remains in the box until her parents ask her to come out, in which both parties agreed to be 100% honest with each other. Which, to be completely honest, was probably one of the first times they were going to actually have an honest conversation amongst each other, which leads to some emotional walls being let down once again, and for the first time some truth/suspicions being revealed or confirmed, and that's what happened. The conversation starts with the confirmation of the fight for one, and why it happened, which were full of reasons surrounding Daria's lack of social skills, and those leading to them needing to put a lot of extra effort into her, along with their high-stress jobs, describing Daria's problems as the straw that broke the camel's back, really not even being the cause of their fight. And Daria took that as, wow, I'm a burden. I've been a burden, and I've only been a burden by being myself for God knows how long. And much like Kid Daria going to her box to escape, Teen Daria left to be with Tom to, well, escape. She gets in a little car accident on her way, prompting her to find a nearby stop to meet with Jane. Side note, this is the cutest moment of all time. This surprised look on Jane's face, Daria's tight grip on the person she trusts the most in the world. It was beautiful. Daria begins to discuss the realization that she's been a pain by being herself. In this talk with Jane, she begins to break down exactly how she's been a pain to her parents, and she starts breaking it down from, this is what happened when this happened, and it's because of me, and blah, blah, blah. She keeps going down this rabbit hole of like, it's always been me. I've always been the reason that shit goes awry. I think any kid could have that connection of feeling like, Though this was obviously my fault, me being myself in this situation, it caused a rift. And in some ways, sometimes it could cause a rift. It is in no way their 100% complete fault. It's not even Daria's fault. She was just kind of like the complicated kid that like had a lot more intelligence than everybody else, and her parents were very, very aware of that. And after talking to her parents once more, she discovered her parents never had a problem with accommodating for her advanced intelligence, because they love her, they understand why she's wired the way she's wired, and Daria takes note of that being okay. But to grow, she'd have to try something outside of her wheelhouse. For example, giving a school tour for incoming freshmen.
Season.